You're listening to the DIY Marketing School podcast. I'm your host and your marketing coach, Melanie Diane Howe. And today I have a special guest. Heather Sager is coming onto the show, and she's going to help you embrace the inner speaker inside of you. We're all speakers. She's also going to help you identify where your stage needs to be so that you can grow your audience. Well, hello there. Welcome back to the show. If you're new here, welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so excited about today's episode because I'm featuring an interview that I did with my friend Heather Sager. Now, Heather is a speaker and an online business coach. And I met Heather in 2019. We were in some online programs together. We got to do some stuff together. And I've just loved Heather's personality and I love her content. She's actually got a podcast of her own called Finding Your It Factor. You should definitely check it out. It's amazing. But I wanted to bring Heather on the show because I have heard her talk before, both on her podcast and in conversations that we've had together. We have a mutual belief, and that is that every one of us needs to find our stage. Now, before you start getting heart palpitations and your pits start sweating at the thought of being on stage, I want you to know that stages in today's modern world are not just the kind of stages where you walk out, there's, a wood floor, there's lights on you, you're mic'd up, and there is an audience of hundreds or thousands of people in front of you. So in this episode today, Heather and I have this conversation about how we really believe that everyone has an inner speaker inside of them and that you need to embrace that inner speaker. You're all speakers no matter what, even if you don't visualize yourself on a stage in that traditional speaker kind of form. And so we break down in the episode the different kinds of stages, one of which includes podcasting, which is this platform you're listening to right now. And of course, live video, which you all know that I'm very passionate about. But anyways, Heather breaks down the different kinds of stages. But what I really love about this episode is that she also she gives you some very good advice and some very good techniques at how to embrace your inner speaker, how using stages, quote unquote, will help you grow your audience organically. She and I are both very passionate about organic marketing, meaning not using paid advertising. Paid advertising is wonderful, but organic gives you the most enriched and best connections. So we talk about that, but I love how Heather also, like I said, gives a lot of really great strategies and tips about how you can clarify your message for these stages. So a quick little background on Heather. So she helps entrepreneurs structure their ideas, clarify their message, and hone their speaking skills so they can deliver magnetic live presentations, videos, and workshops that grow their authority. She's spoken on stages around the world teaching 6- and 7-figure business owners how to grow their businesses using effective communication. She's the host, as I said, of the top-rated podcast, Finding Your It Factor. Before starting her company, she was an executive at a top management firm in healthcare. Heather lives in Portland, Oregon with her husband, 2 sons, and her furry child, Chompers. So another thing I'll say is before I bring this interview to you is that you're going to notice there are a few quirky audio things. And, sometimes technology can be our friend and other times it can give us a little bit of fits. So I am going to give you that little bit of heads up that especially as we get into the interview, later on into the interview, you'll definitely start to notice a little bit of clicking and some funkiness on my side. Certainly something for me to troubleshoot, but hey, I always embrace a new challenge, right? But I didn't want to hold back this interview just because of a few weird little quirky audio issues, because it is so powerful and there is such a great message in this interview. Heather truly does basically deliver us with a bit of a mini training in this episode. So without further ado, here is the wonderful interview that I had with my friend Heather Sager. Well, hey, Heather, welcome to the show. I am super excited to have you here today because I know my audience is going to just love this episode.
Thrilled to be here, Mel. Thanks for having me.
It's so fun. So, Heather, obviously I talked a little bit about you in the intro, but why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself and tell my listeners a little bit about what you do and how you help people?
Sure. So my name is Heather Sager. So I'm a speaking coach for online entrepreneurs, which always sounds so fancy to say, like speaking coach. But essentially, I help people speak in front of groups, whether that's on a live stage or it's on a camera or a webinar or on any kind of video, helping entrepreneurs talk about what it is they do and how they serve and educate other people, all relating back to their business so they can grow their authority, their email list, and sell their programs.
Awesome. Yeah. And I obviously, you and I got to meet each other last year. We both went to Amy Porterfield's entrepreneur experience. And I had, I remember I saw you because we were connected virtually, if you will, in the private Facebook group for Amy's bonus experience last year. I was one of the mentors that year and you were one of the students. And I remember, you just were showing up. I remember you had this presence about you. And then when I actually got to meet you in person, you had even more of a presence about you. And so it was just kind of like, that is a girl that I want to hang out with. I want to meet her. And we had a couple of mutual peers as well that said, you guys need to connect and meet. And I just remember you had this like presence about you. And it's funny because your podcast is called Finding Your It Factor. And I know that you're all about like, hey, you don't have to be born with the it factor. But the thing that's interesting is when I first started really following you and connecting with you, I was like, you know what? That's funny. Cause I literally, when I like first became around this woman, you had that it factor. Like you did to me, you had the it factor. So talk to me a little bit about what you mean by the it factor. Tell me how do you define that? And tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, thank you so much. That's very sweet of you to say.
I think I said the other day you had your crap. This girl had her crap together. Like I want to be around this woman.
That's how I hope everybody introduces to me, is the kind of person that has her crap together, which I'm a mom with 2 young kids. I don't ever feel like I have my crap together. So for somebody to say that, I'm like, oh yeah, my branding is on point. So for me, what's funny? So I grew up a really, really shy kid, like shy. My kindergarten report card, if that's a thing, that I don't know if you actually get report cards in kindergarten, but it said, Heather is a joy to have in class if only she would speak out loud more often. And it was so funny because my mom, I remember her laughing at that comment because at home, I had this very vivacious, really loud personality. I'm the youngest of 6 kids and I am not shy by any means with people I'm comfortable with, but put me in situations where I don't really know who's around me, I go really quiet. So what was interesting is for me, it took a really long time for me to get comfortable being completely myself around other people. And it took a while to jive. Like, do I want to be loud and vivacious? Do I want to be the funny girl? Do I want to be the pretty girl? Do I want to be the smart girl? Like all these things you're trying to figure out as a woman, like growing up through your adolescence and beyond. And I had this really significant moment that happened in my life when I was in high school, when my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. And she fought through it pretty much my entire time in high school. And she ultimately lost her battle to cancer right before my 18th birthday. And I share this because it was right at that moment my family decided that we wanted to do something different in our like family existence. And we wanted to start a nonprofit to help raise more awareness around it. Specifically, it was around holistic and complementary medicine for cancer treatment, which was very important to my mom. And there was this moment where we decided we were starting this nonprofit, and my brothers and sisters like thrust me to the forefront and said, you're going to be the person who talks about it.
Oh.
And I'm 17 years old, turning 18. And I'm like, what do you mean? And I became the spokesperson for this nonprofit. And it forced me to start bringing personality, start actually bringing my voice into conversations in the local environment and local nonprofits. And I had to start speaking up a lot more about something that mattered. And I realized in that moment that each of us have things we're really passionate about. Each of us have our personalities we share in private, kind of behind the scenes. But when we find something that is important to us or a group of people we really want to help, if we're put in the position where we can help them and we're brave enough to actually bring our voice and our personality to it, we can make really incredible things happen. So fast forward now, I mean, a lot of years later, I now have gotten really comfortable with infusing my personality, but also being brave enough to use my voice. And that's why I love helping other people do that. But for me, I think the it factor is having the confidence in yourself to actually use your voice in the moments that matter and not diluting your personality because you're trying to make other people like you more, or you're trying to fit a mold. Like it's completely being comfortable with who you are and showing up in the conversations that matter.
totally speaking my language, sister. This is why I knew I loved you and why I just knew that we would have a great like connection. And we have. And I know that you and I, we hop on Voxer and we talk all the time and we're like business buddies, if you will. Like that's kind of a phrase right now. But I love everything you just said. It's such a beautiful background and a very inspiring story. And I think it's important for people to understand because I know that for me, I have a very bold, very strong personality, right? And it's sometimes people, I mean, I wear people out sometimes, and other people, I think, get energy from me. One of the things that I always get told is your energy, your energy, your energy. And I think a lot of people just, they will say to me, because like I'm always trying to get people to do more live video. And we're going to talk about some of that stuff today. But, you know, they're like, oh, I'm not like you. And I'm like, no, anyone can show up in some way and speak and so that's one of the reasons why I love your podcast, because you believe that anyone can have the it factor. You just have to find your it factor, your own personal unique it factor. And I love that. And I think it's so true. And so I love how you inspire people to find and figure out what that is and then put themselves out there. You and I both have, I think, very similar missions. We just kind of go about it in some different ways and how we help people. But today, you know, I know that you help people with speaking and whatnot. So today I really want to hear what you're like, how do you define stages? Because I know that you obviously, when people hear I'm a speaking coach or I help people with presentations, I think immediately they start to envision, you know, like somebody standing on a stage, a physical stage with an audience present physically there, right? But I know that you have some different categories for stages. And so I'd love for you to talk about the different kinds of, and I'm putting up air quotes that no one can see. So everybody just envision me putting air quotes up. Talk to me about the different kinds of stages.
Yeah. So I think this is an interesting thing. I kind of shy away from the term public speaking because I feel like when we talk about public speaking, we all have really weird memories of like speech class or debate in high school or Toastmasters, which depending on the local chapter, you might have a really positive experience with, or it might be real stale. Like we think public speaking as this, I don't know. There's not this really beautiful thing that comes to mind for most people when you use the term public speaking. So I don't really
think of
use
their
that.
pit sweating and like their butterflies in their stomach and
So it's one of those things. I don't really use that term a lot, but essentially that's what it is. And I think the reason why I don't use that term is a lot of people think public speaking is I'm getting up and giving a presentation. But here's what I like to say. We all speak every single day. All the time. We speak to our spouses, our kids, our clients, our customers. We speak up in meetings. Like we're all talking all the time. But for some reason, when we make it now I'll air quote, a formal thing by saying like we're on a stage, all of a sudden we go fuddy-duddy and it becomes this really scary thing. But the reality is we all speak all the time. So all of us are speakers. There is a profession of speakers, of people who actually make all of their money by speaking on stages. That's not my audience. I don't actually work with quote unquote professional speakers. I work with entrepreneurs who want a platform to share their message with more people. So like I think that's one of the things to talk about. We talk about speaking. It's not for someone else. We're already all speakers anyways. So just like to put it out there, even if you're listening to this today and you're like, oh, I'm never going to speak on a stage or I don't give presentations, you still speak. So you would benefit from speaking training, even if it's to get what you want in an argument with your husband. Like, so I think side note, we all can benefit from having better
notes.
Skills. Yes. Take all of the
now
notes.
Now they're tuned in.
I know. I'm like my husband. I'm like, don't listen to my podcast because I don't want you to use my tactics back on me. So let's talk stages. So obviously there's the stage that we all think of when we say stage, we think of like a produced production live event stage. So we've all been to a conference or something like that where we see the speaker up on the stage. That is a stage. But no, even at conferences or events, there are all different kinds of stages. So you might have the big stage that everybody's in the room and they all listen to that person. But also most conferences have breakout sessions where they're much smaller and usually there's not an actual stage in the room. So you're on the same floor as the other people, maybe small groups, but you don't have to be in front of a giant audience to speak on a stage at an event. But I think even beyond that, sometimes, especially for entrepreneurs who don't consider themselves to be professional speakers, even that feels a little outside of the norm. And maybe your audience, your customers aren't attending those events. Like that's not your people. There are other kinds of stages. So a stage is just a vehicle for you to share your message. So I want you to get the imagery of a stage out and just go, what are some different methods that I communicate with my audience? So, for example, this podcast is a stage. It's a stage for you, Mel. Every week you come up and share your voice. You're on stage every week. And it's a stage for me right now. I'm sharing my message with a whole new audience. I'm on stage.
Mm-hmm.
That's a platform. So you have the audio world. So podcasting, same thing on video. If you do videos online, and oh my goodness, we can go into a whole slew of things on that. You have live video, which you and I have talked about on my podcast.
Yeah.
There's Instagram stories, a very informal stage of just showing up and talking to your people. There's webinars, like actually getting up and teaching a workshop virtually, whether or not you use a camera or it's just audio. I guess that's a topic for another day. I highly recommend using camera. But all of those things, virtual stages, there's so many different ones. Like I don't want you to get caught up in the which type should I use. The reality is you're most likely already using some of them. So viewing it as a stage and then getting ready to bring the right message and the right energy to that stage, like that's the first step.
Mm-hmm. I love it. Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And I love how you just, again, you're helping, my audience and everyone understand that a stage is not necessarily, that thing where you walk up the risers and you walk across the platform. And so, I love that you have you actually have real stages, and then you have breakout sessions. And obviously, you mentioned podcasting and video, and that's heavily with social media. But I think that I liked how you kind of just said there's just all these different platforms, and we're speaking all day, every day. Even if you are standing behind the counter at your coffee shop that you own, and you're talking to your customers, or you're helping them understand the difference between the different coffees, or why, we want the pour over versus the whatever, that's in a way your stage as well. So I love how you kind of just pointed out that we're all actually on stages. But there is potentially maybe a reason why some people should step out more onto stages, or step into other stages or other people's stages. And so why don't you talk a little bit about why you feel it's important for entrepreneurs and business owners to embrace stages, if you will?
Can
more
I give
air
a
quotes.
little example? Let me give a little example before we go to that question.
Yeah.
Something popped in my mind as you were just talking about that idea of like the barista in the coffee shop being on stage. So there's an example or everybody's familiar with the idea of Disney, and this idea that Disney, all the characters, all the employees at Disney, they're a cast. And if you think about, like, they're on a stage every single day, from the person taking the tickets at the front, from the person selling the balloons or the snow cones, like everybody in the park of Disney is on stage. But they're sitting on a sidewalk or behind a booth or something else. And there's a lot of studies in marketing and customer experience around Disney, but a lot of those can be brought into, if you have a brick and mortar business, a lot of those can be in there. But sometimes just using the analogy of a performance or a stage to your employees can go a really long way, because what you do is, like, when you quote unquote clock in to your stage of work with customers, if you're like, oh, this is all about a performance of living our brand, we elevate things a little bit and we think about those engagements in a different way, because every conversation we have with our team or with our customers, like, that's an opportunity for you to better connect. And if you view that as stage work, I don't know, it just kicks the notches up a little bit. So I think that's a really beautiful way to be thinking about it, is even those are stages. So you brought that up.
Yeah, I love that. I love the Disney example. I mean, obviously Disney is amazing and they do all kinds of amazing things. And
magical.
So, yeah, magical. Absolutely. So good. So why don't give us the breakdown? Let's help us understand why stages.
Now. Yeah. So why stages? So when you're an entrepreneur, specifically, let me talk to online entrepreneurs for just a moment. And I guess for everyone, you think about when it comes to our marketing, so finding people to expand our audience, we typically talk in there's organic marketing and there's paid marketing. And I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. I'm sure you talk about that all the time. I am a big fan of organic marketing, a big fan of word of mouth marketing. And I like the thing that I talk about with my audience. I use this analogy, and it might be slightly weird, so just follow me for a second. I love analogies. I like to imagine that as a business owner, you are a queen or a king over your kingdom. And I want you to imagine that you're in a castle, and it's like one of those, I didn't watch Game of Thrones, but I'm just imagining this is how it is. They have these like fortresses, with the walls around the whole like kingdom and castle, and like you block everybody else out. I think a lot of times in business, we think I'm going to stay in my castle and support all of my people, all of my kingdom in here. And we just focus on serving them all the time. And then every once in a while, we like throw a bone over the wall and be like, hey, we're in here, come join us.
Mm-hmm.
And we like blast marketing out into the universe, but we stay cozy in our little castle all the time. And then we wonder why more people are not joining our kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And we try to keep finessing things and keep casting whatever messages out into the universe. Maybe we set up some fireworks and try to get people to come to us. But it's just like you can only go so far by trying to influence people to join your kingdom. In this scenario, you're trying to make a larger kingdom. So what I like to say is like the best way for you to let people know you exist and to go get other people to join you in your fortress is you actually have to go to them, which means you actually have to get outside of what you normally do. And you have to go to new kingdoms and be like, hey, look how awesome we are. You should come join us. So for me, like when I think about the benefit of stages, I think twofold. You have stages where you can connect with your existing audience, let's say Facebook Lives or Instagram stories, or maybe a webinar, or if you teach in a membership or something where you have existing people that come in, you have your stages that serve the people in your kingdom. But also you have to think, how do I go find new towns to go like rub elbows with people and show them how great what we do is and invite them over for dinner? So I like to think about that. It's attending events or getting yourself a spot on somebody else's podcast. Or my favorite strategy is saying, hey, can I come in and teach your group about getting more comfortable on camera? I'd love to come do a free training in your Facebook group. Or, hey, do you need a bonus in your course? Oh, you do marketing? I teach people how to get better on video. Can I be a bonus in your course? Like offering your services to other entrepreneurs to better serve their kingdom by you joining them there. And then you start putting your name out there, you start putting your content out there, and people are like, I resonate with what she has to say. I want to follow her back and actually learn more about what she has to offer. So I like to think about this idea as stages isn't just about this idea of like, let me be a big deal. Like, let me get my name out there and make it look like I'm such a big deal. Stages and finding stages become a necessity because ultimately as an entrepreneur, especially as a personal brand, you can't rely on other people to like taunt your name and get yourself out there. Like nothing is more effective than you actually going out and talking to other people so they can see you, get to know you and be like, gosh, I like her. They're going to follow you and then become a very loyal advocate for you and your brand.
Love that. I think I love the analogy of the kingdoms, by the way. I also did not watch Game of Thrones. I'm sure I'm going to get an email where someone's going to say there were no fortress walls or whatever. I don't care.
Just imagine for a moment. You had a visual in your mind. I just know it.
Everyone you're good. All right. You Game of Thrones people just, whatever. Sorry. We didn't get into it, but I do like that. How you explained that you have to get out of your bubble basically. And I think that, it's kind of like, I have an episode where I talk about, building your website is not good enough. It's not the concept of if you build it, they will come. It does not work that way. You have to find a way to drive traffic, if you will. So that's why you use social media and you always want to be leading people back. And what you're describing is essentially the same concept. It's go get out there and speak, not necessarily the whole public speaking aspect, but get out there, connect with people, find these different ways where you can go share your gifts or share your guidance and your expertise in other towns. And like, that's the analogy, but it's these spaces are other people's businesses, other people's podcasts, other people's courses in their Facebook groups, on their Facebook lives. I absolutely love this because that is, I think, there's a lot of statistics out there that talk about your audience will grow faster if you actually are a guest in other people's content. And so I know that, that's a strategy of yours, Heather. That's a strategy of mine because this year I am planning to kind of expand my audience. I'm ready to get out of my little kingdom and start to say, hey, let's build a bigger kingdom, let's have some fun together. So, and that's exactly why I started getting involved in the courses and the programs, because what a great kingdom to join, to go hang out in. Right. And so that's how we connected, as we went and hung out in the Amy Porterfield land, and we connected and we found all these other people.
Queen Porterfield.
Yeah, right. She is the queen. And I think that the way you described it is really great. And I love that analogy because I think it's easy to understand. So let's talk about, so I know that some people are comfortable with this concept of putting themselves out there and going and, sharing their thoughts and sharing their expertise. But there's probably a lot of people that are a little bit, apprehensive, or maybe this is new territory for them. So I know that you've got 3 truths, right, that you kind of like want people to adopt. So can you talk a little bit about that to help maybe with the mindset aspect of this whole concept?
Yes. So it's funny. I'll mention this. I don't love the word mindset. You've noticed I have some words that I don't love so much. We talked about
like
how I hate the word slick. Yeah, I don't know. It's just, so we all have a set of beliefs around how we view certain things, and some things might be triggering. So I know for me, when I work with clients one-on-one, or many of my students, and I have a program called Speak Up to Level Up, where I work one-on-one and in groups with entrepreneurs and help them craft their message to get more comfortable with their signature talk. There's usually 2 camps. People who are like, oh my gosh, I have no problem speaking. Like, I'm totally comfortable in audiences. I just want to be more effective with my message. I'm like, okay, perfect. But then we have another group of people going like, oh, I am so terrified at the thought of either being on a physical stage or on a camera, or both, right? So you have people over the gamut. And a couple of the things that I've learned, it's not just about the art of having a quote unquote signature talk, which is what I say. A signature talk is having content that you can use over and over again, designed in a way that not only educates your audience on what they need and want, but it directly connects back to something you sell in your business. Not that you're going to sell it in your talk, but it leads people down a path where they're going to want to work with and buy from you. So that's a signature talk. So there are some things that you have to believe about yourself, so you show up in a really confident and competent way. So once you have a talk, like, just having it isn't enough. Like, there has to be a few things that you adopt. And these are 3 truths that I believe have to be in place in order for you to show up in a charismatic and competent way. So truth number 1, you must believe that what you have to say matters. And I say this because I know so many of us, especially when we venture into maybe new aspects of our business, or maybe we're pivoting and serving a new kind of audience or a new product offering, there is always this constant thing on repeat in our minds, questioning ourselves that, who am I to share this thing right now? And I'll give you an example for me. So my background, I was a consultant, and I worked in the physical space for businesses. I worked in the medical space for 10 years, coaching entrepreneurs. When I moved the online space, I was thinking like, who the heck am I to teach people how to use camera? Like, I'm not quote unquote an expert on that, even though I use cameras every single day. Like, we all have this set of beliefs. Like, you have to believe that what you have to say matters. You have to believe that in your heart, that you have a message that you want to share and it's valuable. Truth number 2, you have to trust that your message is going to come out as it should. I think a lot of times we hold back saying what we want to say because we don't think we're going to say it in the right way. We're worried that we're going to fumble on our words or make a mistake. Here's the thing. I word flub all the time.
Word flub. That's a new one
flub
for me.
it up. Like, I mix up my words. I'll twist a sentence. I'll drool on myself. I am fully committed that, you know what? It's not about being perfect. It's about getting the message out. And I trust that when I show up to a microphone, whether it's a metaphorical microphone or a literal microphone that's in front of me right now, I have to trust that whatever comes out of my mouth in this moment, it's good enough and it's actually the perfect thing that needs to happen. You have to believe that in yourself. Even if you don't have a ton of experience speaking, you have to trust that you'll always get better. When you start, you're probably going to suck a little bit, but even still, your version of suck is so much better than somebody else's. So you have to believe truly in your heart. You have to trust that whatever comes out in your moment, it's going to be the right thing for that moment. Mm-hmm. And you also can get better.
Love it.
Truth number 3 is you have to see yourself as an authority and a leader, which means you have to see that you're a person who actually leads other people. They're going to hear your message and they're going to be influenced by it. If you don't see yourself as an authority or a leader, if you don't have that confidence about you, people are not going to follow what you have to say. I have something that I say all the time. I think as a leader, especially as an entrepreneur, there are two fundamental values that you have to hold, and it's confidence and humility. If you're confident without humility, nobody wants to follow you because it's just egotistic.
Right.
But if you're too humble and you don't bring that confidence, people aren't going to pick up what you're throwing down. They're going to think that you don't even believe in your own words, so why should they? So I think balancing this idea of confidence and humility, it helps you see yourself as an authority and a leader, and people want to follow leaders. If you're going to use your voice to get a message apart, you have to view yourself as a leader.
Love it. That's amazing. Confidence and humility, right? Those are the two things. I love it. Thank you. That's like good stuff. I mean, the thing is like, I mean, so everything you said, it makes sense. But what about if someone is still in this place where, I mean, I think you didn't use the phrase imposter syndrome. Syndrome, excuse me. I don't
There's
love
your
that
word,
phrase.
flub. See,
Yeah.
flub.
Yep. Syndrome. I make words up all the time, and my
Me
audience
too.
knows that.
Me too. They're my favorite. My audience has a whole thing called Sagerisms. Yeah, I
Yes.
make up words all the time. Sometimes I remember them, sometimes I don't. But I think those are the best moments.
I mean, I make up words and I don't realize that they're made up words. Sometimes I
Yeah,
just think they're real words, but
that's
whatever. I
totally
don't know.
fine. That's
Makes
part
sense
of
to
you.
me. But I want to know, I mean, these are three mindset areas, and I know you don't love the word mindset, but three truths, if you will. But what if someone is still struggling with that aspect of, well, who am I? Or, they're not everybody, some people, I personally believe that confidence is a choice. Meaning if you don't feel confident, you can choose to be confident. You know what I mean? Like it is a choice. It is a state of mind. And so what kind of thoughts or advice do you have for people who maybe just need to, I don't know, maybe they need a kick in the pants and just to go for it?
All right. I love this question so much. I'm going to get on here and preach for just a second.
Uh-oh. Get ready.
So I do believe confidence is a choice and you have to work into it.
Mm-hmm.
I am a big advocate of give yourself a lot of freaking grace and get really clear what you're expecting and asking of yourself. So let me give you an example here. So I'll use an example and an analogy. So let's talk about entrepreneurs. If you're in the online space, if you're not in the online space, I want you to see how this applies for you. There are, let's call them big hitters in any industry. The people who are visible that are seen as the go-to. So for us, it might be Amy Porterfield, James Wedmore, Brendan Bouchard. There's so many others, right? That we see them. They're the ones who are out there on video, doing live events all the time. There's always content going out. And we see them and they inspire us to be like, oh, maybe I could do even a fraction of what they do. And we get excited. And what we see is the tip of the iceberg around what they're showing now, but we don't really pay attention to the years of work they put into getting to that point in their business, but specifically their articulation skills. This is what I want to hone in on because I think we're all so hard on ourselves because what's in our head feels so clear. But I want you to imagine this. So my number one downloaded episode on my podcast is how to articulate your thoughts so others can understand you.
Okay.
Which I was like, how is this the number one thing? This is like the number one pain point of my audience. They're like, I have all these, they feel like really brilliant ideas, but when I open up my mouth, they do not. I mean, it sounds like I'm on an episode of like Elmo. Like I'm not getting it. And so what happens is in their mind, they've built up expectation that they talk like Ed Milet. They should talk like Rachel Hollis, all these people. And then they go to do it and they watch a video of themselves back, or, I mean, that's if they're brave. They probably don't even watch it. And like, I am nowhere near that. I am terrible. I suck. I'm never going to do this again. So they don't. And then they go back to behind the laptop or behind the counter or wherever they're at. And they're like, that's just not for me. They're special. I'm not like them. It's just natural for them. But so what we're trying to do is those people, let's say the people that we put up on a pedestal, let's emulate this like they're the people running a marathon. And we are still back at the phase where we need to go through the couch to 5K program. Remember like 15 years ago when that was a really big deal, that if you running, but you've never run before, like you have to go back to the very basics to say, how can I start taking baby steps to grow my skills along the way? So I want you to give yourself some grace and say, hey, I'm most likely not going to articulate myself as good as these other people who've been doing this for much longer than me. But I also acknowledge that I'm in a learning mode, in a growth mode, and I've never worked on my own articulation or communication skills before. Maybe you did it in speech class, but have you done it now talking about your services, what you do, your marketing skills? Like, have you actually worked on how to talk about these things outside of writing marketing messages? Writing copy and speaking out loud are not the same thing. So what I would encourage you to start thinking about is how can you put into practice something as simple as speaking your ideas out loud every single day? And a technique that I use and I coach to, you're going to laugh at me because this is not a sexy term, but you're going to get the gist of it. It's called the word vomit exercise. And it's this idea that like, I want you to embrace word vomiting every single day. And it's as grotesque as it sounds, which is I want you to just allow words to fall out of your mouth and see what comes, just to hear, okay, you have a thought in your mind, or you, let's say, ask yourself out loud a common question that you get. What comes out of your mouth? Because I guarantee what's in your head and what comes out of your mouth are not the same. And that tension, that juxtaposition between those things probably makes you pretty annoyed at yourself because you're like, oh, I should have said that better. Oh, I should have said this, or I should have used that phrase. Like, we're so hard on ourselves, but we've never given ourselves the opportunity to practice. So practicing, and I use the word vomit activity, which is you think of a question you want to ask yourself, and then you allow yourself just to riff on it. Most importantly, out loud. You can't just think about it, because what we think in our heads are not really coherent words. They're more like words and imagery and all these things. They're not coherent thoughts like words. So you have to get it out and then just allow yourself to talk. And then you're going to say, ooh, that didn't really make any sense. So ask yourself the question again and then word vomit again and see what happens. And every once in a while, as you're going through this, you'll say something that you're like, oh, that sounded really good. I call that a golden fragment. It's like a part of a sentence that sounds really, really good. Write that down and then ask yourself the question again. And now you have a golden fragment to build yourself off of. And so next time you get asked that question, you at least know something brilliant to say. You might not have all the other perfect words around it, but you have a coherent thought that you can bring to the party when somebody asks you that question. So word vomiting is just getting comfortable connecting your mind to your voice, getting it out. So that way, when you're in the moment of speaking on a stage or just answering a question or a customer objection, you're more comfortable getting those words out. I think that's the most underutilized thing, is people actually practicing their words more often.
Oh, I love it. First of all, word vomiting definitely has a new meaning now in my world. So thank you for that. And I think I do love what you're just those golden nuggets and just hanging on to them and just continuing to like elaborate on them. I find for me, I have these random moments where I do a lot of thinking in the shower. I don't know about you. I listen to podcasts while I'm in the shower, but I do a lot of thinking in the shower and while I'm getting ready. And I have a dry erase marker in the vanity because I have those moments, and I call it naked whiteboarding. And I will just start writing the stuff down as they come to me. But those, I think that what you're describing, those are, for me, actually, I write those down on my mirror, and next thing you know, I'm working on more content around it. So I think that's absolutely fantastic. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. So I'm curious what it would do for you and do for your articulation around some of these ideas. You're on video a lot, so you're constantly saying things out loud. But I'm curious if you had those ideas in the shower, pausing whatever you're listening to and just allowing yourself to riff on it for a moment to test the words on your own tongue. Mm-hmm. What does it actually sound like? Not just the thoughts, but what do the words sound like? And this will serve you in a couple ways. One, when you later to go to talk about it, it's going to be a little bit more fluid. But also, we don't write the same way that we speak. And we know time and time again that marketing copy is far more effective if it's written in a conversational tone. Mm-hmm. But the difference is most people write in formal language and speak in casual language. So if you actually get in the art of thinking through your ideas out loud and then write them down, you're going to be much more effective as a marketer.
Wow. Yeah, I think a lot of people do it the other way around, Heather, and I think this could be pretty profound for some people. So basically what you're saying is talk it out first in a way and then, write it down essentially. Is that correct? Is that basically what you're saying?
100%.
I love
Talk
it.
it out, talk it out, talk it out, and then write it out.
Talk it out and then write it out. Okay. I love it. I love it. All right, Heather. So let's bring this one home. So I would love for you to I know you have so many tips because you just do. You have all kinds of content in your podcast and everything else. But I would love for you to just do like almost like a rapid fire, down and dirty. Just give us a bunch of tips, as many as you can just squeeze in here in like 5 minutes, right?
Let's do it. Let's get dirty.
I love it. Let's go. Let's get dirty.
Okay. So I want you, so listen, I want you to think about this is I'm going to give a lot of different ideas. I don't want you to try to adopt all of these things. Figure out the one that feels like, oh, that's exciting. Try that. Go practice that for a bit and then come back to this episode and then take on something else. So don't look at this as a checklist of things to do, just more of a buffet of things for you to taste to figure out what works for you.
Love it.
So, okay, let's talk about, so we already talked about the word vomit thing. That to me is a non-negotiable. I think everybody needs to be doing it, which is practicing saying things out loud every day. So let me make that even more practical. What I would recommend practicing every day is take your list of commonly asked questions. So let's say you're like me and you're a podcaster or you want to be on podcasts. What would be some potential questions that Mel, if she were interviewing you, would ask you? Like, tell me about yourself. Tell me about your program. Why is your topic most important? Think about what are some of those general questions that you hear podcasters ask. That is a good thing for you to word vomit and practice. You should have those responses. I hate to use the word canned, but you should have an idea of what you're going to say. It's like your elevator pitch. Who are you? What do you do? You need to be practicing that out loud. It's one of the most difficult questions for people to answer. If you start your question or you start your answer with it's kind of hard to explain, and then you have to go into this paragraph or like full page response of describing what you do, you need to word vomit on it and figure out a easier way to explain yourself. So that's where I would start with the word vomit, is make sure that you know how to talk about what you do more concisely. Find those golden fragments.
Love it. I'm guilty of that, by the way.
Yeah,
in the past, I'm getting better.
Oh my gosh, we all are.
I'm getting better. I'm going to keep working on it.
And I would challenge that once you do it one time, you're not done. Like, let's say you find the iteration of describing what you do. You always want to think about, okay, there's going to be things that elevate and change in your business. So for example, today, when you asked me to introduce myself and what I do, I said it differently than the podcast I was on yesterday. So I have the gist of it the same, but I'm going to adapt a little bit based around the audience that I'm serving. So your word vomiting thing, you might come back to the same questions over and over again and keep making them fresh.
Okay. I love it.
Okay. Tip number 2, I want you to acknowledge that you speak with more than just your words. So I like to talk about communication. It comes in 3 parts. And I like to use the a visual of, it's like a pie. You can think pie chart if you want to make it fancy. I like to think more of like a chocolate mousse pie situation because that's my favorite. I want you to imagine you have a pie in front of you, and that pie is how you communicate your message, whether that's with your husband, your kids, or your customer. Your communication has 3 slices. One is the words you say. The second slice is how you deliver those words. So your tone, your pitch, your pace. And the third way is through your body language, which means everything you say without saying anything at all. Now, here's what I want you to understand and remember. What you say matters, but how you say it matters far more. Specifically, those 3 slices, they are not equal. So portioning how you say what you say, so that tone, the vocal delivery, that's 38% of the pie. 55% of the pie, more than half the pie, is your body language. So your facial expression, that crazy eyebrow that goes up when you're like, you crazy. Your resting, not so nice person face, your slumped shoulders, crossed arms, tapping toe, all of those things when it comes to your body language, 55% of your message comes from that, which leaves only 7% of your message down to the words that you use.
Wow.
I want you to let that sink in for a second, because how much do we obsess over using the right words? Now, don't confuse me. The wrong words will definitely erode your message, but they're not as important as we carry weight with them for. I want you to think, like, just even that, rewind that sentence. That sentence didn't really actually make sense, but you got the gist of what I was saying because of my passion in my voice.
Mm-hmm.
So the words, they don't always have to be perfect. And that's why, going back to that truth I shared earlier, you have to trust that your message is going to come out as it should, even if the words are not the best, most eloquent words. If you work on your delivery, if you work on your presence, you mentioned a lot about my presence when we first started this podcast,
Mm-hmm.
which sounded so nice and flattering. Also, it was really validating because I have worked so hard on my presence in relationship building, my presence on stage, my presence with my friends, with my colleagues. Like, for me, how I show up, I want people to get a sense of who I am before I ever open my mouth. And that comes from body language. So applying this to you listening today, I don't want to get super geeky down this rabbit hole, but here's what I want you to acknowledge. What's your face look like when you're not speaking? What's your listening face? How are you using your hands? When you talk to someone else, maybe if you get comfortable, audio record or voice record yourself, what does your tone sound like? You notice for me, I have a lot of character and dynamics in my voice. That is not how I am naturally. I'm just like everyone. I started out talking like Eeyore. Like, I had to work for it. Like, you have to figure out, how do you vary up your voice so that other people want to pay attention and listen to you? So if you notice the inflection, the enunciation, that how I vary things up, that's not by randomness. It's also not something that I'm automatically thinking about all the time. I've practiced, and I practice by, here's a really good tip. If you have kids at home, use really good characters when you're storytelling at bedtime. Like, get into character voices and like fully commit, and you practice. It's like the ultimate like stretching of your voice. Practice it, get really into it so that you bring just an ounce more charisma into your voice in daily conversation.
Wow. I love that. That's a great tip.
Yeah, I do it all the time. I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, and they love it when mommy reads bedtime.
Oh my gosh, I bet.
But they think I'm doing it for them, but really selfishly, I'm doing it a
You're
little bit
practicing. You're working. Mommy's training right now. Mommy's working. I love it. Heather, so valuable. Now, I know that you have, like I said, I mentioned that you have your own podcast, Finding Your It Factor, which is amazing. And I will make sure that I link to that in the show notes for sure. But you have a lot of other, I mean, you obviously have programming. You have a group coaching program. I think you have an online course even around helping people, but you have some really good resources. I'd love it if you could share some of those that you think my audience would find valuable and helpful. And I'll make sure obviously that we link to this in the show notes, but do you have any kind of tools or anything that you can offer that someone can take away and can just learn more and apply some of the stuff you talked about?
Sure. And thank you. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, there's a lot of really great resources. I think I'll narrow it down to two things specifically that I think can help. One, as you mentioned, the podcast. I believe that when you're finding a mentor to help you in a certain area of your own personal growth and development, you want to find someone that you resonate with and that you like. So I always say, start off with the podcast, listen to a couple episodes, especially the solo shows, so you can get a flavor of the types of teaching that I do in my teaching style. And if it resonates, then you can go check out some of the other things that I offer. But I feel like podcasts are really good first dates, maybe even second, third dates. So you can get to know that flavor with that person to see if they fit there. And I've had some really amazing guests on, including Mel, talking about live video. So that's where I would definitely say, so Finding Your It Factor, you could just go directly to heathersager.com/podcast. But if you know that what we've been talking about today, this idea of leaving your kingdom or queendom and like going out and getting yourself on podcasts or guesting in other people's groups or stages at live events, if that's something that you're like, oh, I would love to get there, even if you're feeling like maybe right now is not the right time, I always say what you want to do is start with a strategy much sooner than you think you need it. So I built a guide specifically for online entrepreneurs, but if you have a brick and mortar business, this would absolutely work for you, of helping you understand how to do seminars or lunch and learns more effectively. It's called The Steps to Speaking on Stages, and it'll help you start outlining what would your signature talk be on and how would you go about finding stages you through the 5 steps that you need to have in place so that you can start growing your authority and your email list. So you can grab that at heathersager.com/5 steps. That's the number 5 steps.
Love it. Yes. Okay. And I'll make sure that we link to that in the show notes. And I think I mean, there's just I mean, I know Heather said she wants you to date her first, but I'm just going to tell you that you know how sometimes you like want to go on a date with somebody, but you already know that you like really want, like you want to take it past the 3rd date.
Okay, don't be creepy.
I'm just saying, guys. I'm just saying. Like, we all got only so much time on our hands. I definitely think you should check out the podcast. I definitely think you should visit heathersager.com. She's got a lot of really great stuff on there. And just, check that stuff out. So Heather, I cannot thank you enough for being here and taking the time to share your wonderful gifts with my audience. And, I know that you mentioned Instagram stories too. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys too. Another place that I like to follow Heather is on her Instagram because she does a really good job with her IG stories. They're not only are they entertaining, but you just get that flavor of who Heather is. And it's another great way for you to see how she's using that stage, as she mentioned earlier. And so if you want to follow a good leading example, then I would definitely say, go check out Heather on Instagram at the Heather Sager. Well, I almost said .com. It's the Heather Sager. Is that right, Heather?
You got it. You got it. It's my favorite place to hang out. I'm there daily. So please come and say hi. If you heard this episode today, at least say hi. Don't be creepy. We can go on a second date. I'm totally on board. My answer is yes.
Okay, guys. Well, Heather, thank you again so much. And I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, Mel.
And there it is. I hope you loved this episode. I was re-listening to it as I was, doing the editing and getting everything ready. And other than the quirky audio issues, I just fell in love with this training all over again. And I am going to call it a training because she drops so many knowledge bombs. I hope that you now understand that you are a speaker. If you're in business, you're a speaker. And I loved the analogy that she used with the kingdoms and how if we want to grow our kingdom, we want to bring new guests into our kingdom, we sometimes have to go out and find them. We've got to get into their kingdoms and allow them to be exposed to us. And one of the best ways to do that is through stages. And of course, stages are not just physical stages. I keep thinking of like the high school auditorium. Stages are podcasting, live video, your Instagram stories even, or just webinars or live virtual workshops that you teach. Being a guest in somebody else's content is one of the best ways to expand that reach organically. And when you have your own stage and you embrace your own stage and you can clarify your message, then you're more likely to get those opportunities as a guest in other people's content and to be showcased. And so I loved how Heather broke all this down. I loved the analogies that she used. I loved her word vomit strategy that she also talked about getting that, those words in our heads and clarifying them, because as she said, the words in your head are not going to come out in the true spoken word that you want them to. So you've got to practice and get that message clarified. So you guys, I hope that you'll embrace the inner speaker inside of you. And I hope that you will identify what your stage is. And I hope you'll look for other stages so that you can grow that kingdom. So that is it for today's episode. I'd love for you to share this episode because I do think there are so many people out there that need to embrace this message and this concept. So you can find Heather, of course, on Instagram at the Heather Sager. You can find me at Melanie Diane. That's DYANN. Do me a favor, take a screenshot of this episode and just give both of us a quick tag. I know that we would love to know that this episode made an impact for you, and we want to make sure that as many people can reach this message as possible because we're trying to grow our kingdoms too, y'all. So help us out. We'd love it if you could do that. And of course, check out Heather's podcast. It's called Finding Your It Factor. It is incredible. Heather does a really great job on that podcast, taking this conversation to a deeper level. And she's got a lot of great guests on there. So I know that there's content over there that my listeners would like. And if you're new over here to the DIY Marketing School podcast, make sure that you get subscribed so that you don't miss any of my future episodes. You guys go have a great rest of your day and go be awesome.